If you work for the Catholic Church and want to transform your parish and put more souls in the pews, we are here to help. I'm John Kahns, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, your leadership development podcast for Catholic churches. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when you stop playing it safe and you start offering real depth. We're here with Eric Gallagher. Eric Gallagher, how are we doing today?
It's good to be back on. It's been a while.
It has been a while. You are one of our few repeat guests, and it's a place of distinction, and I hope you feel honored.
Very, very good.
Eric, we go a long ways back. You've been introduced yourself to our listeners before, but for anyone that's new to the podcast, new to listening, new to you, give them just a 10,000-foot view of who Eric Gallagher is and what he does.
Yes. So I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm married. I have 4 children. I've been in ministry for 20 plus years now. And the first 7 of that was as a parish youth minister. And then I went on to serve as the diocesan youth director and different roles as well for another 14 years. I took a step of faith and started my own apostolate right after that. And honestly, I've spent a couple of years really just kind of figuring out more specifically how that's going to play out. And just recently, or over the past year, really, it's the clarities come out, but starting a nonprofit and doing all the things to pursue the ministry that I feel God is calling me to. And so now that exists under a 501c3, and the vision for that is really, our tagline is really feeding the spiritually hungry, meaning our goal really is to deepen the faith and the discipleship of those who have already made a commitment to follow Jesus. And so to get them together and to give them the specific formation that they're looking for, which is primarily one-on-one discipleship, spiritual direction, formation and prayer and discernments are the most common things that we do. And we're establishing a center here in Sioux Falls in the coming months, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it seems to me that there's a lot of fruit. Like I hear people talking about it. We've been friends for a long time, so we've had discussions behind the scenes. I've heard your heart for this, even before you took this leap into starting this ministry, this 501c3 Suscipe. I heard your heart and hunger to just do things that bore fruit. And so I'm wondering, can you just kind of give us, I think a lot of our listeners, those who work for the church, our Catholic ministry professionals, they have experienced what you experienced, which is there is a recurring theme. There is a desire in their own heart. There's a hurt there. There's something that breaks their heart for Christ and the people they serve. And you perceive that. Could you kind of give name to that gap you were trying to fill, kind of that hunger that you experienced that has led you to this point and is still the thing that's kind of your, I don't know, guiding star, that point that you're following?
And I think it started with giving so much of my time and life to youth ministry and seeing that the fruit wasn't there. And I did almost everything right in a strategic sense. Facebook was just out and you could go online and get groups and learn from everyone across. Like, it was the first time you could connect nationally pretty easily. And I did what everyone did, and we had participation, but you just look up years later and you see that these young people you've invested in aren't practicing the faith. And so it just causes you to question, well, what else, what are we doing wrong? Or is there even a real solution? You just kind of lose hope. And I started working at the diocese, and I saw that across the whole diocese, just kind of this hopelessness. Well, then I went to get my master's in theology, and I started reading The Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales, and he really answered the desires of my heart, which were how to be holy. And if you are holy, then the Lord will work in you and through you, and you will bear fruit. And it was obviously aligned with Scripture and the vision for evangelization. I was reading all the books, but in short, the vision that I have is, I feel like we beat our heads because the people that we're giving our time to are not duplicating anything, like it's not growing to any extent. And so I just have pursued, at least in my own world, in my own ministry, what I know to be like the seeds are planted. We know that anyone in ministry knows how to really get some things going. The vision that I have for ministry really is like, I want the roots to grow incredibly deep and there to be fruit that's shared. And that really becomes the work of evangelization. However, discipleship is bearing fruit, however, your relationship with Jesus Christ is bearing fruit, that's ultimately what will evangelize. It's the visitation. It's Mary possessing Christ, living in the world, and then watching these experiences, this moment where Christ goes to another and the joy is felt and experienced and that's the vision that I've had. And so I just want to focus really intentionally on that. And when I was at the diocese, I was given plenty of opportunities to do that, creating retreats specifically geared towards those young people that were desiring more. And then just kind of integrating a level of depth in everything that I did that I hadn't done before, where it was strategic in the sense of we're going to focus primarily on a relationship with Jesus. And there's a lot of other things that we could be worrying about, but without this, we have nothing. And so it really became the top priority. Sometimes a lot of other stuff was neglected, I think, as a result. There were people who could criticize the like hired missionaries to run VBS programs. And were the VBS programs great? I was never good at organizing VBS programs, but I was good at helping these college age students fall in love with Jesus and then go travel around the diocese. And it grew, even though a parish could probably put on a way better VBS program than we were putting. These are college students. They're not trained. They're not good at much of anything yet, but they were falling in love with Jesus. And so there's something different that attracted people and drew people closer to him.
I want to pull out, you just said something along the lines of, I was good at helping college students fall in love with Jesus. There were other things that you weren't good at, and you can acknowledge that, right? Maybe the details portion of it, which I would agree with. With me, I struggle for details. But I want to pull that out because you recognized, oh, I have a gift and there's fruit here. When you experience that and you could name, I'm good at this thing, did you just go full tilt into that and say, well, then this is where we need to focus our efforts? Did you experience, I mean, was it really hard to balance out all the pieces there? Kind of pull apart that a little bit for us. Say more about
Yeah.
how you followed that while still fulfilling the obligations that were on you with your role.
Yeah. Yeah. There were two moments where personally I just experienced the moment where I'm like, this is what I was meant to do.
Hmm.
And it was in a one-on-one conversation and just Christ just showed up in a unique way, in a way that affected both of us. And it just was a clear call that I want you here in this space. And yeah, it over time, I had about eight years probably where it started to take shape. And I would say if you looked up again, kind of if you looked on the inside from the outside, the diocese, my office was running less programs than it was when I first got there,
Hmm.
or doing less trips than when I got there. There were certain things that I loved that I just got very detached from, and we put it more on in maintenance mode and just kind of autopilot mode. And if it wasn't doing that kind of work, then I found other creative ways to make it happen if it had to if it had to happen. But I would run camps. We would run summer camps with 140 people at them, and I really saw it as like, we're going to organize this camp because it gives us opportunities to have conversations about Jesus. And so
Hmm.
the camps were the part that had to happen in order to create the space to have these real conversations about Jesus. But that was always the goal, was to get to that point. And for me, it was just, I was full time in ministry for 10 to 12 years before I started to see that and want that and do that. And I was just kind of frustrated because it's like, I've worked so hard, but it just has felt, of course there's fruit. Of course God uses all of our good works and all of our efforts, but everything changed once I prioritized my own spiritual life and started growing in that, and then helping others do that as well. And by the way, helping others do that as well helped me immensely in my spiritual life. I started to learn things about Jesus because as I met with people, they would teach me through the way that they were living.
Yeah, I think if there's been a recurring theme that I've seen in the time we've known each other is a push towards depth, right? Kind of that acknowledgement that we can put on good programs, we can get a lot of kids through them, but then this lack of fruit due to a lack of depth of roots, right? And so you created these going deeper retreats, which I'm happy to let you talk to people about. I'm sure there's a version of that in the ministry you're doing now, but talk to me a little bit about the importance of depth in the ministry we do, not just pushing people through so that we can keep track of how many events are we putting on, how many kids, how many, all the numbers and stuff, but how do we focus on that this need for depth? The scripture that comes to mind for me is St. Paul, where he talks about the difference between milk and meat, and how people are hungry for meat. They need meat. And that honestly, if they're not ready for meat, then we've failed them somewhere in formation. I mean, I'd love for you to have an opportunity to speak into that a little bit, and maybe why leaders are hesitant to offer depth.
Yeah, for me it was it was scary because I just didn't know, like, well, one, I was giving them what I was receiving. Like, it was like, I don't want to give you too much because you guys are going to grow faster than I'm growing. Like, that was one of my fears, was like, these kids are like falling in love with Jesus and I don't know what else I have to give them. Like, I was just sharing with them the teachings and the growth of in my own prayer and what I was reading and studying in the spiritual life. So part of it is that, and then there was definitely moments where I was afraid just that it wouldn't work. Right, like, I was a diocesan director, and the first retreat I did, I invited 5 students, right? At the same time, I was organizing a youth conference for 1,800 to 2,000 people. That was a one-day conference, and here I am investing 3 days and 5 students. And so part of it was that balance of like, well, I really hope this works because it's not only an investment of my work time, but I'm leaving my family for the weekend. Like, there's all this risk that's kind of being taken. Of everything I'm reading shows me that this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But will everyone else see that too? And I was at national diocesan director gatherings, and some of my favorite best friend colleagues in ministry around the country like disagreed and told me it was going to be a waste of time. And these are some of the people running the most successful diocesan youth and young adult ministry programs around the country. But Sioux Falls Diocese is different. So, and I just knew that. And so it wasn't a right or wrong conversation. They were more like, "But there's just no way that we could do that." And for me, I got to the point where interiorly, I just thought there's no other way I can see it happening. And not through me, but just through methods. And so, yeah, for me, that was the scary part. And then you just wonder, well, like, what if this actually works? Like, there's this fear kind of like what we're doing for the 5, like, we can't do it for 30, like, because there's deep work that's happening here, and we don't have enough adults. And there was a point where, like, it was probably my 4th or 5th retreat where something just clicked, and I said, this is the formats, this is what we're looking for. And I remember being very scared of my prayer and just saying, like, Lord, we're going to need good adults, because the key to this working is having really solid adult mentors that meet one on one with these students. And so we need 3-to-1 ratio for adults, 2 to 3, 2.5 to 1, basically. And we have 2 people helping me right now. And so if this grows, like, where am I going to find another 10 adults? And I think that's when I started reaching out to people like you saying, hey, we got to grow this. And what was so humbling about it was all these people who, like, if I made my dream team list of adults to say, I want, these are the people that I think should invest in these young people, anyone that could did.
Hmm.
Like, anyone who, if there's a valid, like, there's just, I don't know, but all of them wanted to. That's when ministry really started to change for me. Is like, we're creating a ministry where, like, if people could do this every day of their life, they would.
Isn't that that's such an important? I want to pull that out a little bit, because we get so frustrated when we work in a parish and we say people don't want to participate, they won't participate in our programs. And we never stop to say, maybe if people don't want to be a part of it, we're doing something wrong, or maybe we're not. I'm trying to think of a positive way to
Yeah.
phrase this
Or you're
statement, but
you're asking the wrong people too. Like,
yeah.
we look to the people, we have a certain short list of people in a parish, and they're very engaged in the life of their parish. And I often would, if I were to, like, guess, many of them are engaged because, in a certain sense, socially, or like just similar to me, like, I worked at the diocese, and that was kind of like me becoming holier was to be more involved in the life of the church, and
Mm,
which isn't a direct indication of holiness. But then what I found in church ministry is you have people who have a deep faith, are real serious disciples, but they're also really good stewards of their time. And so they're not going to give themselves to a ministry that they don't see as fruitful.
mm.
And we need both of those people, right? Like, we need people who serve just for the sake of serving. They're not there for whatever kind of happens. If Father asks them to do it, they're going to do it. And we need those people. But the people who have a real gift to be shared, we need to be good stewards of that and put them in a place where it's going to make the greatest impact. And when you align those two things by giving people a space to share the gifts that their hearts are just desiring to give, they give. And as I'm running a nonprofit now and doing that financially, like I've never been in that world financially, but you meet these people who they're so honored that you ask them to give because they have this tremendous gift and they want it to be shared. They want to make an impact in the church, and they'll give as much as they possibly can because that's where they're called.
And if they believe it to be fruitful. And
Yes.
so that's why that's so important. Like, where are you seeing fruit as you're kind of walking into this new world with Suscipe? And I do want you to talk about the Lolek Center too. Yeah, so feel free to
Yeah.
tell people kind of what's going on and how you've followed the fruit from this earlier conversation of I'm having these conversations with these teens and it's feeding their souls and Christ is really present here. Following that fruit and that discernment into kind of where you're at now.
Yeah, the greatest thing that came for me that stuck out with those retreats is I would have so many parents coming to me saying, watching the transformation of their own children, like watching their children be transfigured into Jesus. And they would reach out to me saying, when are you going to start doing this for adults? And the reality is the adults are looking for the same thing, like this, just simple spiritual formation, teaching people how to pray, walking with them, listening to them. Like these are things that typically it it doesn't it doesn't exist well yet in many parish structures. And so there's a creativity that needs to happen, which focus, we if people are familiar with focus on universities, like that's what they do. They meet one-on-one with people. It's with college students, and so there's a certain lack of depth that's going to happen because it's again college like even 25-year-olds are less, they have less wisdom to offer perhaps than a 40, 50-year-old person or something. There's just certain things focus can't do. But the fruit really comes when you just see an individual. How holiness typically happens is these people are growing humbly, quietly, and without anything that's really, they don't even know if they can name it. They're just in a relationship with Jesus. And all my experiences, I've seen it happen primarily through one-on-one of like, tell me how your relationship with Jesus is going. What questions do you have? What are struggles? What as you're like, there's gonna be things in your heart that you're just wrestling with, and then a person who's wise in the spiritual life and gifted, especially in the spiritual life, to be able to just listen to those things and help offer some counsel. You just watch these people fall in love, and then you see the world begin to change around them.
And
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 so it,
uh, and like the difference in that conversation versus like a confirmation prep program where you're doing a confirmation interview and you're just like, tell me about your faith life. Tell me
yep,
about your prayer life. No, tell me about your relationship with Jesus and what's going on there. There's
yeah,
two
and
very nuanced difference there.
yeah, and I don't think it'd be difficult to do like in a confirmation program because to find a number of adults who feel comfortable even having that conversation, like, I mean, that's where I was again after so many years in ministry, like I wanted to because I was convicted through a real profound conversion. Like the relational dynamic of the relationship with Jesus has always been at the forefront, but it's not the norm. And so you just feel awkward asking those questions. And then you're worried that people are gonna think you're crazy for talking about like, what do you mean? Like a relationship with Jesus? Because there are priests and parish staff and such that their love for the church is primarily through devotion, sacraments, things like that, which is obviously relational too. But it's almost like you just miss each other when you're having the conversation. Like, no, we're talking about the same thing. There's just a great diversity and variety of ways that God loves us.
It's the difference between Leviticus and the Psalms, right? Both
Sure.
are expressions of the love of Jesus. They're both expressions of it, but like Leviticus is like this is how you live out these sacrifice. This is how you live it out
Yep.
liturgically. Psalms is my heart is in love with God, and I just want to tell Him.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that's so you talk about like the confirmation program. I think I would never want this to come across like we need like the confirmation program needs to become that focus. Like it would be great if we could more naturally have that conversation with these students, but I don't think like imposing this concept onto a confirmation program is necessarily the right thing. What the vision for Suscipe and the Lolek Center, like this nonprofit, is We want that work of real deeper formation to happen. And then for those people who are engaged in this ministry to go to be in to infiltrate those kinds of programs. And I've talked about this with my own pastor. Like I lead a study, or I lead a Wednesday night group with at my parish for our catechesis night. And ours is a big old, like, it's a mixed ball of kids from everywhere. Like, and they could be anywhere on the spectrum. Well, I told my pastor just this last week because he was kind of asking about this Lolic Center and the vision, and I just said, well, look at it this way: we have a group of about 12 people, guys in our group. I have a small group in my parish of 12 guys, which is not a small group, but we'll get past that. But without the guys in the group who are actively engaged in their faith, this would be a really difficult. Like the stuff you're asking us to do would be nearly impossible because you're asking us as a group to care about this topic. We go through scripture a lot in our catechetical program. It's a great program. Like it teaches scripture, it gets them into scripture. It's beautiful. But if we're going to have that conversation, like without the guys who care, like it would just be really awkward. And so you want to, like, it is beautiful to see, like, because my gift and my interest is really just working with those few that are engaged, but I'm here as a parish volunteer working with the 12. I get to see the beauty of when you cross contaminate the worlds a little bit and see how the growth can happen. And so it's just a unique way that things happen. So I think the question, the discernment, how a parish begins to go down this path, it's just more complicated than, well, we should just do discipleship and evangelization. And there's an argument to be made for that. But also, like, we do need, for our young people especially, we need a good systematic approach to teaching the faith. And there's students, that's their vocation in that moment. They're really good at learning at that time of their age, of their life. So it's just more complex than that. You can't just say, well, why don't we just, yes, let's just talk about, let's make that the only priority. And if people just put Eric Gallagher's personality into the thing, it would lack a lot.
And nobody wants that.
So it's an important part, but they have to work together, and that's why it
Mm.
started an apostolate here in Sioux Falls, and really helping anyone who's desiring to kind of impregnate the life of the church with this sort of ministry. We want to help do that.
I really like that though, and I want to talk. Let's talk about the role of apostolate, particularly as like in the future of the church, going forward into this next season of the church, where Monsignor Shea wrote that great book From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, where there really is a need not to just catechize future parishioners, but to form missionaries for the work of evangelization and discipleship, and how that looks. It looks different. And I want to talk about that because what you you had was a very intentional discernment of your gifts. Real acknowledgement of that, like, God blesses it when I do this. There is fruit here when I do X. And then seeing a gap, a need in the world, and then saying, like, yes, Lord, I will step into that breach. Right, I will step into that place, and from that has flowed, where you're at. You've formed this nonprofit. You've got the Lolic Center, which is going to be I think, amazing gift, particularly in a community like Sioux Falls, where you have 9 parishes, and they all have this need for something like this. And now they don't have to create things off the top of their head to fill this need. They can actually, wouldn't it be great if a youth minister said, hey, you know what? We want to go somewhere that's not on campus, like not on site at our church because the kids don't want to show up here. But now we've got somewhere we can go and we can meet with them. Or, hey, I found out 10 of my kids from this parish go here. Maybe all I need to do is show up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what a gift to not have to plan, program, and think up all that stuff, but be able to utilize the gift of this apostolate within the context of their parish. So speak a little bit into, and I'll just ask you this. Do you think everybody is called to an apostolate in this way? Or what would it be like if everybody did step into an apostolate? Speak
Yeah,
into that space a little bit.
I think that's the challenge that we've seen in the Catholic Church, or since youth ministry became professionalized in a sense. Like, we've kind of convoluted this idea of, like, there are people who just love to do ministry, but then it turns into a job. And that's like that's the most frustrating part for people, like in my world, is like, no, this is my ministry. Well, not to the pastor. Like, the pastor, just, you're on payroll and you got a job to do, right? And but it's both, sort of. So you do, and when you can have both, that's beautiful. But I've just seen so many times where, well, that pastor likes you doing that ministry here, but when the new pastor comes in, he wants a different ministry. And there's just so many conversations we had about that. But I think because the state the church is in, it's part of God's plan and his permissive will, in a sense of, as the church leadership starts to shrink in size, right? It's going to need more help. That's not priests. Like we're there. We're already there. We need more help. And you're seeing different solutions to the problem. And I think some people are just trying to hire their way through all of it. And I think apostolates aren't typically like, there's just many apostolates that don't need to be full time, or they don't need to be, a volunteer could do them. They could be part time. They could, however, and I just think there's a growing need, an increasing need for those apostolates to be there to help. But then the transition that has to happen is our priests and our parish staff have to take more of a pastoral approach to the idea of, and I say this and it often sounds, it can feel attacking, but it's like the church needs to be more interested in what the Lord is doing in the life of the people than trying to get the people to help them with their things. And that's what often happens is you get a priest or a parish staff member and they're like, I have this big idea and now I just need to go get all the people to help me with it. And like starting a nonprofit, I know what that's like to try to convince people that they should help you with your idea. And it's really hard. But I just think it's, as someone who's leading an apostolate, it's really helpful to have the shepherds looking at me and affirming and saying, hey, yeah, I think this is the Lord's work happening in you. And that just, I'll do anything. If I'm aligned in that sense with the life of the church and our priests and their role of holy order within the life of the church, I think that's going to have to be the next step. But it is a transition time because the fear often is, well, if we start helping all these other people, who's going to help us with our things? And that's whatever the Lord's will is and all that. Maybe you have to do less things, right? And I feel like that's what happened to me at the diocese is I was doing less things, but I was seeing more and more of Christ at work throughout the diocese than I'd ever seen. It was just a different ordering of how things were happening. So I do think everyone, to some extent, everyone is called to an apostolate, but apostolates can be volunteering at your parish. Like that could be the thing that you're really called to do. But the key to understand the apostolate, like it's really only an apostolate if it's first received as a mission from Christ. And I think that's the thing that's missing. Or if you say, well, is the person who just comes and dusts the pews twice a month after masses, is that really an apostolate? If that's what the Lord has put on their heart to go and serve the church, absolutely it's an apostolate. And it doesn't have to get any fancier than that. But don't forget that they're doing it because they feel the Lord is asking them to do it. And that's when I first started speaking around the country. I remember Divine Renovation had come out, and I would give all my talk, and then I had never read Divine Renovation. I think I've looked at it one. I haven't read it, but people would always come up, and it sounded very much like Divine Renovation. And my response would be like, here's the thing: is you're trying to copy and paste what this priest did in this book. Just don't forget the fact that what he did first was he petitioned to the Lord his people and asked for his will to be done. And then he did all this stuff. And you guys are just skipping that first step. That's our tendency, is to want to skip that first step and just jump and go do all the things that he did that worked. But he only did it because of a real response to what the Lord is doing in his heart.
There's a real, discern. That's discern and then go.
Yeah.
Right. But part of that is making a decision too.
Yeah.
And I think God honors decisions. I do think he does that when it's, done with right intention and in proper order and a good discernment and all that stuff. Like our Catholic ministry professionals, our whole framework is pray, plan, lead. Like discern, pray, and then make a plan around that. That St. Francis de Sales, make a resolution, right? Make a plan. Okay, now go, right? Now go, lead. And that's our whole thing. But there has to be that discernment. And, I've got friends who are so zealous to serve the church that they'll say yes to whatever Father asks them. It's like, but actually by By saying yes to one thing, you are saying no to another. And there might be an actual need to discern here and consider whether or not this is actually what God is calling you to do. Because that popular phrase, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I think people forget sometimes too that, like, yes, there's a hierarchy in the church, and particularly for our Catholic ministry professionals, your pastor might ask you to do something, and you might think in your heart of hearts, this is a bad idea. Are you willing to sit down and discern with him and say, hey, Father, when I pray, I'm sensing this. I'm receiving this from the Lord, and this seems to be in contradiction to it. Your story with divine renovation, what's true in that is that what you were saying sounds a lot like what they're saying, because you're both following the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit is doing the same work within all of us. That's why when we really discern and we receive, and we like to talk about vision on the podcast, when you receive clear vision from the Lord, your prophetic office, this is what God is calling us to do, and I'm going to speak into that. When you receive vision and you speak into that, it's going to resonate in people's hearts, especially those who are feeling that call themselves, particularly those who are actively discerning, those who have that spiritual depth. It's going to resonate because it is the same work.
Yeah, and the Spirit is acting generally in the same ways across the church as a whole. So when you look at, like, well, yeah, small groups, doing an alpha program that brings people into the basic gospel message and then inviting them into small groups, like, that's also timely across the entirety of the church. And so it's not bad to look at the situation and say, actually, yeah, what he did is a good response to what's happening in the church and our country and our culture generally. But if you really want to follow after him and receive the depth of where he's gone, you can't neglect the interior part of that. And so I'm sure it's been recommended a million times on your show, but the Soul of the Apostolate is like the handbook to all of this. And it's really the Martha Mary. It's a book on a treatise on Martha and Mary, basically. And it's just choosing the better part and ensuring you're not just busying yourself. And I think you said something earlier that just struck me. Like, if you feel like, if you're really going to work for the church and you feel called to help people in the church, you really have to pay attention. Like, if you feel this desire growing in you or this like unfulfilled reality, you need to be a witness to the other people and chase after that to some extent. If you've been sitting around for a year or two and you're growing frustrated. You know, like, it's actually a year ago or 2 years ago, you're less healthy in your spiritual life and in life in general, and you know your work for the church is at the heart of that. Like, you really need to do something about it. And I mean, this is what you guys do through your ministry, but you have to take that seriously, because that's not only a sign that it's not bearing fruit to some extent, but it's a sign that the evil one wants nothing more than to stop you from doing actually the thing that God is asking you to do. That's why he's putting so much pressure on you. That's why he's trying to tear you down, because of the potential of what's going to happen if he doesn't.
Yeah, and that's really important. I actually experienced that in my own professional development, as well as like my spiritual conversion happening kind of in tandem with each other. That when I came into ministry, I had a really shallow faith, right? I was kind of the good enough Catholic, is what I always say, but there was something really concrete that happened in proclaiming the name of Jesus that made him real to me in a new way, and I had to respond to it, and it was wildly uncomfortable. It tore down every area of my life that I was clinging to that was not him,
Mm.
and it was painful, and it was messy, and I acted like a toddler and threw a tantrum. Then I came out on the other side of that saying, Lord, let's try it your way. And it's still been kind of messy, and it's still a lot of growth in that too. But there's a reality that needed to happen in me first before he could bear the fruit in the other areas as well. And as I fast forward, through all of the ministry I've done, becoming a father and a husband and experiencing the domestic church, I've realized that at the very least, my apostolate is to them.
Yeah.
And if that's not in order, then I've got something out of order. And so that, like, there's this idea of apostolate. It permeates. It's not about going out and forming a ministry. It's about responding to the call that is on your life and in your heart with the gifts that he's given you in the particular place in which you are right now. It's not for tomorrow. It's not for 2 years from now. It's for right now, and you have to respond to that. And so that's going to look as many different ways as there are people that are in relationship with Jesus. And to your point, we as a family discerned a group of friends that we are very invested in because we feel like our apostolate is to our kids. And as a result of that, it will flow into the community as well. And so we've picked very specific friends because they have kids that are our kids' ages, and we know we have the same goal in mind, which is heaven, which is holiness. And so at the very least, we're cultivating a community around our children that fosters that. And so, like, it doesn't have to be more than that. But what did happen is that this has been a really good thing. And the parish found out about it and they said, well, hey, do you guys want to split up and form new groups and
Yep.
teach them? And we're like, no, these are our friends. We're just hanging out. I would go to a group if there's another group of people and they want to know what we're doing, and I could bore them to death with the reality that we're just getting together. Like, we're intentional about praying together, and we're intentional about talking about our faith, and then we're just intentional about getting together. And that's it. And so there's no program or anything. But to your point, it's simpler than it needs to be, but it's far more nuanced than what's the right program to make it work.
Yeah, because I think people who work in the church put a lot of pressure on themselves of like, it's our job to save people, right? And
Mm.
and I know that sounds cliche, and but like, yes, we know that, but it's like as if you didn't do everything right and do all the work and put in all the time, and yeah, your family has to sacrifice a little bit, and but it's for the church, like it's for we need to help people. And I think if that's your headspace in ministry, you really got to do a real gut check, because the urgency is there. Like, we need to have an urgency to bring the faith, but a true humility and understanding of God's will and all of these things. Like, what I found over and over and over again is people who kind of climb that ladder of pride and believing that so much falls on their shoulders. Like, the Lord's pretty good at knocking them down at the right time. And that might be you just walk in one day and Father says, "Hey, we're gonna probably let you stay until the end of this semester or whatever, but I think it's be good for you to move on." You're like, in your mind, it all depended upon you, but a year from now, you're not even there anymore. Like, there's it depends not at all on you anymore. And the Lord will teach us those things. If we give him the opportunity, he's gonna give us that lesson. And so we have to be really careful to put ourselves in the headspace. And that's why, like, I just started Exodus 90 today. I've never done Exodus 90. I've kind of been like an anti Exodus 90 guy, just because I'm kind of an anti what everyone else is
If
doing
it's
guy.
popular, I don't want to be a part of it. You're
That's
so
how I am.
hipster.
But my son, like, yesterday was like, "Hey, you wanna do Exodus 90 with me?" And I was like, my head 100% was like, "No way am I doing
That
Exodus
sounds
90."
awful.
But what came out of my mouth was, "Yeah, I'd love that." And but why do we do these things? Like, we need to be continually reminded that God is in control, and we need to put ourselves in a situation where we're choosing to let him be in control. And so choosing to not do that next thing and spending time with your family instead, or prioritizing your family instead, is going to bear more fruit in the life of the church than you announcing the next biggest program. And I remember going to my bishop when we were running summer camps and they were exploding, and I went to him, I said, "We want to add a fourth camp." And he's kind of like, "Yeah, I mean, if you want, you can. What's your wife think about it?" And I looked at him dead in the eyes and said, "I guess I should ask her." And he laughed, and he just all he said was, "You know that my priority is family first, and so, yeah, if she's okay with it, then, yeah, I think you guys can move forward with it." I don't remember, I don't think I actually ever asked her. I just when he said that, I was just like, no, I think I'm gonna make the decision that this wouldn't be good for us." And so I'm sure I talked to her about it at some point, but I just kinda moved on, because when you order things correctly, you just can put on the right glasses and see things the right way. And that's all he did. It was he, as a bishop with the sacrament of holy orders, he ordered my heart in a way that helped me discern it well. And so I think that's a huge thing in apostolates. I think that's the great temptation sometimes, is we feel like, well, we're going to be giving more. Well, I think what that does is it starts to reprioritize and reorder some things, and we just got to learn to be creative and let the Lord help pave the way, because it might mean you're not as involved in things. And I'm less involved in my parish than people might expect of me. but I'm really pursuing the things the Lord is asking me to do. And I've been very clear with the parish, with my pastor, and with our evangelization director. The things that they're doing are just not things that I feel like I'm really good at or excited about, and so I'm helping at a minimum level, but I'm just communicating to them, like, I really feel like I need to pursue these other things that I feel like are gonna be more better use of my gifts and my time. And it sounds offensive. I think they might even receive it a little bit offensively, like, "Oh, our programs aren't good enough." We have a good pastor and a good dearie,
Well,
but
sometimes that's true.
yeah, but it's that and that would be very human of them to feel like I'm judging their programs, and to an extent, I'm judging it in the sense of, like, it's just not for me. I'm
Mhm.
not saying it's not the right program to be doing or, like, you need to make those decisions. I'm not gonna make those decisions. That's not my job. My job is to pursue what the Lord is asking me to do, to be a disciple of Him. And if they've asked for help, I've given it. And that's when if you read, there's two main documents. I won't even be able to say the names right now, but on the apostolate, and really what it says is that there you need to be incredibly collaborative and generous when asked. And so you can do the thing that you're called to do. So that's your example is a good example of that. Like, well, we have this apostolate, and if they asked us to be generous, like not at the cost of the apostolate. Like, we're
Mhm.
not we need to maintain the integrity of the apostolate. Yeah, if we can help do if you see something good in it and we can help, we're gonna jump in and help as much as we can. Anyone who is a part of the Eucharistic Congress, I think this was a surprise to me, was the bishops just opened the doors to, like, every organization that was doing good things in the church. And it was the first time I saw a real collaboration and partnership between the bishops and all of the other big organizations that are making a real difference in the life of the church. I think that that's new because usually you don't take that risk of putting your name next to one of their names because of what the scandal that it could cause. But they just were so generous and collaborative that and it produced something really beautiful, I think.
A little apostolic messiness.
Yeah.
I love that. So one of the scriptures that really is foundational for Catholic ministry professionals is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. All right. And the way that this frames for me is that Philip was probably established in a specific community doing a specific ministry to which he had been asked by Peter, or he was this is where he was. But he wakes up one morning and he hears the Lord calling him to just go. And it doesn't say go do this. He says go to this place. And he responds, he's okay, I will go. That's the next step. I'm going to go. And then when he's there, then he sees this Ethiopian eunuch go by, and now it's decision again. Do I go with this guy, or do I wait for Jesus to show up in another way? I'm going to go here. And then he's with the eunuch, and they're reading the scriptures, and eventually comes to the eunuch, says, well, what's to stop me from being baptized? Another discernment point. Okay, no,
Mhm.
nothing. Yeah, you should be baptized. And then immediately he's called off to somewhere else, is what the scriptures say. But in all of this is a very real freedom to say yes to what Jesus is calling me to do in the moment. My experience speaking with a lot of Catholic ministry professionals is that they don't feel that freedom to go where they feel the Lord is calling them. So as we kind of close out and round out our discussion, that's something that I hear that you have responded to well. God has called you and you have felt a freedom to go. I'm wondering, I know people are listening to our conversation. They're hungry to go, and maybe it's not to go off and start their own apostolate, but there's something in their hearts, a desire there that God has placed there that they need permission to go after, but they're unsure how to do that. What's, for those listening and those people who are hungry for that, what permission would you give to them in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think my wife and I would probably both agree that the desire for me to start this ministry and this facility, I could make an argument that it's been in my heart for over 10 years now. And not only that, but I could look at everything that has happened really in my life and see that the Lord has been preparing me to do what we're doing now. But I just knew that as like a restlessness in my work. But I couldn't name why necessarily. We'd kind of looked at different jobs and applied for different jobs, but it was like I was okay with the job that I had, but there's still something stirring in there. And so I think just taking that more seriously, like I'm not a very good example of that because it took me a long time. If the Lord's plan was to do this a lot sooner, I wasn't listening to him. And then really, I think just connecting when I meet with parish staff, because I consult sometimes with parishes, and I usually encourage when I help them with their job description, like if you have a DRE or an evangelization director or something, let them give 10% of their time to an area of the church that they love that they would do even if they weren't being paid. It's kinda like their tithe of their time. and just let them be really interested in this kind of. So even if they stopped being the DRE, they might still run this program. Like some people that's RCIA, like they would do it even if they weren't paid. They just love it. And they're being the DRE so that they can teach RCI kind of thing. Like there's that kind of mixture. And I just and connect with people who are following those same things that you're really interested in, and I think doors will begin to open up. And it could be, I mean, I'm a pretty radical version of this, of like, well, let's just go and start I just raised 90 some $1,000 in the last 3 weeks. Like never a year ago I would have said that's never gonna that's not gonna happen through me. And so that's a great path, just because to me it's the way that this is gonna have to happen. But then I just think you pray for doors to open, you talk to people. If you're working for the church, you have these conversations with your pastor of like, there doesn't need to be any anxiety about it. You just need to kind of express your desires and your interests, and where the doors open up, let them maybe like send you to a conference, or I don't know, buy some books or whatever it is. But you just start talking to people, and then I think the doors begin to open up. And then the longer you wait to follow that, doors are going to start closing on you. God's going to start having to kick you a little bit to go down
Mhm.
that path. And I would just warn you that your preference should be to not have to be kicked down the path. That's what's happened to me a little bit.
We've all experienced that.
So my greatest advice is like, just take it seriously. And in fact, that's like the Lolek Center is going to be a space for deeper formation, discipleship coaching, one-on-one discipleship, spiritual direction, like specifically for people to pursue that part of their life. Like there's something happening in me and I want clarity, confidence, and I want to move forward with other people who are pursuing the Lord as well. That's the vision. And the more you can surround yourselves with people like that, just take the time, like take an annual retreat and let that be your main source, like your main thing for prayers. Just this, Lord, you're doing something. I just want clarity. But yeah, my main advice is just to take it seriously, that the Lord sees it, He put it there, He's inviting you, and you don't, just because you don't see or have the answers yet, He's talking to you. So you should probably have a conversation with Him.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Eric, this has been a fantastic conversation. If this is resonating with people, where can our listeners go to connect with you, to learn more about Suscipe or the Lolek Center?
Yeah, everything's going to be moving kind of towards the Lolek Center type stuff. Suscipe, you can go to the Suscipe website right now at suscipe.org, but really everything's moving over to it's lolekcenter.org. It's LOLEK center.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you for being on the podcast, Eric.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you, dear listener, for listening to this episode. If you found it helpful, don't let it be just another good idea. Text it to a priest or a friend in ministry and start that conversation today. And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.